Good afternoon. Welcome to Judges chapter 5. I trust that you're going to read it just in a moment here. There's a number of things that really relate this to a portion of prayer that I've preached on in the past called Osippa. I'm going to go over that in just a little bit, but I just would like you to pause the video at this point, have a quick read of Judges chapter 5. It is only 31 verses, and think of it as a bit of a lighthearted reaccount of chapter 4. So anyway, pause the video and we will speak to you soon. Okay, so trust you had a quick read there. There's a couple of things that we need to look at here. I've got my deep fried peas to snack on during this, and let's take a look at Judges chapter 5. Judges chapter 5 is broken up into 8 separate sections. Verses 2 to 3 is praising God. 4 to 5 is an invocation to God, basically calling God out for the things that He has done in the past from Mount Sinai. 6 to 8 is descriptive of the desolation under oppression, under the oppressors, and references in this is to Jael, if you recall, the one with the tent peg. Then after that is 9 to 18, which is the mustering of the tribes. This is the 4th section, mustering of the tribes. 19 to 23 is the Battle of Kishon, a brief description of that, and that's again in chapter 4. 24 to 29, the death of Sisera. 28 to 30, the mother of Sisera awaits the coming of her son back from battle, which of course doesn't happen because he now has a little bit more iron in his brain. And 31a is the epilogue. And as I was reading this, I thought that this is very, very close to the Osippa prayer, AWCIPA, and those are basically sections of prayer that give a person a little bit of a skeleton into how they can pray. It starts with adoration, worship, which is praise. C is confession, and then intercession and petition, and then once again adoration one more time, so more praise. And so that this is because it's the earliest prose, which is kind of a poetry, the earliest poem, which is a poetry of the prose, which is the story that was in Judges chapter 4. This is a lighthearted reaccount of what has happened, and so we can bring the parallels to a type of prayer today. And I hope that you would take this to heart as being what you got out of this. Hopefully, you got something indicated by a different speaking of the Spirit to you. But what I got out of this, and I hope that this resonates with you, is the parallels between the Song of Deborah and the style of prayer. So to start with, the adoration and the waiting section, adoration and waiting. The adoration was, of course, the praise, praising God for what He has done already, an invocation saying basically, and it's a style of praising as well, because Deborah is calling into question God's motives, what God has done in the past, and what God is going to do, and as she goes through this chapter here in her song, she moves forward. So it kind of goes like a basic sitcom, you know. This is the family, this is the problem that is or this is what happened last episode or in the past. This is what is going on currently, the problem that we're having right now, how it happens and plays out in the episode, and then the closing. So the adoration is praising God, invoking Him to come to their aid as He did in Sinai, as they were going through the desert, and then after that is the waiting and the confession, basically saying that We are waiting for you to deliver us, which is before Deborah actually comes about. They're waiting for it because, again, at Mount Tabor is the only portion of trade and really can intercept any trade that's going through. And with the Canaanites at the helm of that, it makes it very difficult to produce any sort of trade with any other countries or areas because the Canaanites had Tabor. So again, adoration and praise, then waiting and confession, confessing what didn't happen. So in the mustering of the tribes in verse 9 to 18, there were a few that didn't show up. And so in confession, that was kind of a confession, basically stating that Reuben and Dan and Gad, which is listed as Gilead, which is kind of interesting that Gilead was the province, name of the province under Assyrian rule. But anyway, Reuben and Dan and Gad and Asher were all east of the Jordan, and the eastern provinces basically just sat on their hands and didn't actually help in the battle. And so the question in that confession is what's going to happen to them? Well, Reuben and Dan basically were amalgamated with Gad and Asher when the Assyrians came in and wiped them all out. But they are still mentioned a couple of times in Revelation 7 as well, as being still counted in the tribes and still in a part of the seal. But the confession is that they didn't help. And for us in prayer, the confession is kind of, God, this is what has happened, and I don't really know what the minds of those people are, but I'm putting forth the problems that I'm having. So that's kind of what's going on here. They're putting forth the things that they don't know why Gad and Asher and Dan and Reuben didn't come. The four of the sons of Jacob didn't come to their aid, but leaving it up to God. And that's a part of what confession is, that there are certain things that, God, I've done these things. These are the things, I leave up to you, the things that I didn't do, the sins that I've committed by the things I didn't do, and saying that you are God and you know enough about everything that I can just leave it in your hands and trust that because you have divine providence over everything in the world, that you take care of it. So again, we've kind of covered adoration and praise in verse 2 to 3 and 4 to 5, confession and waiting in 6 to 8 and 9 to 18, which is the mustering of the tribes. Then there's intercession and petition, which is the mustering of the tribes is the intercession, basically when everybody comes together and does something about it. So the prayer that was kind of listed and how it was answered was that people came forth in verse 2 and 3, came forth without needing to be conscribed. The kings showed up, the people showed up, and even though they didn't have any weapons, which we read that there was only one among 40,000, whether they actually didn't have weapons or whether they just had literally one spear between 40,000 people, were two different things. Did they actually have weapons, or were they just afraid to show them because it would be taken away and they would be killed? Is left up to question. But everybody comes together through intercession and they petition God. And petitioning God is asking for prayer for yourself. So again, Deborah in her wisdom would blessed Barak, saying that the Lord will go before you. And as we discussed in chapter 4, that the snow and the hail came down, thus making the ground really wet, so that the iron chariots were useless because they could spin in mud. And I remember specifically this weekend when I was in the States doing this warrior dash, I had just gone through the trenches of water, and there was an uphill it was just solid mud, and it was kind of like a cartoon where you go, and then right into the mud, face in. It was in my mouth, it was in my nose. But anyway, kind of same thing that the chariots were going through as they were spinning their tires. The chariots were basically useless, and so that was what the petition was, that God would go ahead of them. And then, of course, adoration comes right after that, in the last portion, in verse 24 to 31, saying that God, you've answered our prayer because you've done these wonderful things in destroying Sisera, and indicating that what was coming to him came to him through at the hands of a woman. And again, a woman was mentioned one more time in Jael, who was the one who killed Sisera, if you recall. And again, so the praise, as was mentioned, did not go to Barak, but to Jael, who was a third party that really wasn't anticipated as being somebody who was going to do anything about it, but about the war, but did end up doing a great thing by killing Sisera. So the praise was to God that he came to their aid and that the great things did happen. So I hope that you can read this and go, okay, maybe this is something that I can take to heart in how I pray, through adoration, through praise, waiting in confession, intercession and petition, and then once again through adoration. And we can structure our prayers accordingly. So instead of just praying for yourselves, this is praying for the needs of others, leaving some things at the feet of God and saying, God, you're in control. Because again, with being equally yoked to God, to Jesus, we can take off of our pack and put it on him as being the stronger of the two oxen in the yoke that we carry with him. Again, his yoke is easy and his burden is light. So in taking those things of the world that beat us down, we can take those off, praise God for who he is, and leave it at his feet, as Deborah did here before the battle. So I hope you have taken some insight into this, and it made some sense for you. It was a bit of a difficult thing to read because it's we don't really understand the poetry of what's going on, but because it's translated into English, and it looks just kind of hack and slash, like there's no rhyming anything because it wasn't written initially in English. But we can trust that this is a very important portion of Scripture, that a lot of the things later on, like in Ecclesiastes, can be better understood because of it. So there were a lot of good things that came out of it, and this is one of the most important songs and poems that we have in the Bible. So it stands alone in itself as being something very important for further study of the Scriptures. So again, I hope you had an enjoyment of reading this. We look forward to chapter 6, which brings us right back into another judge, and this is actually one of my absolute favorite stories in the Bible as a whole, through this this man named Gideon. And so I'm really looking forward to that. We'll see you next week. Have yourself a great week, and God bless. Bye.